Hello and welcome to the FPL tips video ahead of game week or double game week 34. Now it's a really tight turnaround here, so I'm going to do the video slightly different. I'm actually going to look at my own team. So I'm on free hit this week. I've saved it for the double game week. I think a lot of the players, well, basically all the players I'm looking at are players people already have, but obviously there's a few little punts here and there as well. And I'd also like to thank David for doing the video last week while I was studying for some exams. So let's get straight into it. Please remember to like and subscribe if you like the video. I'm recording this, it's Friday evening. The deadline the last game week only finished yesterday. The deadline is in a matter of hours. You'll be watching this Saturday morning, probably just hours or even minutes before the deadline. So I will try and keep it as brief and concise as possible. So for those watching, on the right hand side I've got the fixture ticker, so that's on the Fantasy Football Scout website, and then I've used FPL.team just to put together what I think is going to be my free hit team, or very close to it, you know, ahead of this game week, ahead of this double game week. So I actually want to start front to back because I feel like that's how we're going to be looking at picking players if you're on free hit. If you're not on free hit, you're still going to be looking at these kind of players anyway. So let's talk through them all. So looking at the strikers, Haaland, I've got Haaland, and I wanted to play with two strikers. I wanted to have 5 midfielders and 2 strikers. The problem is the only real double game week options were Jota, who we don't know if from photos that we've seen tonight, he hasn't trained, and Klopp did mention he took a knock to the back. So he may well be fine. I think he wasn't pictured in training ahead of the Man City game, and then he miraculously recovered and played. But it's put me off going for Jota. I think it's going to put a few people off going for Jota. Then Martial didn't even start for Man United during the midweek fixtures. He only came on for the last 20 minutes or so. Didn't even have a shot on target. So I think it would be bold to go for Martial and Jota. Because I think something key this week is we've got 6 teams who've got a double, but I feel like Fulham and West Ham are probably going to be overlooked because they play Man City. Fulham have Man City at home and then Liverpool away. West Ham's aren't quite as bad. They've got Palace away and then they've got Man City away. But I think if you're building a free hit, or if you're looking to use transfers, and I think hits are fine this week, if you want to do a few hits, I think you can justify it. But I think we're only looking at 4 teams really. So Manchester City, Brighton, Man United and Liverpool, they all have pretty good doubles. I like Man United's the least of the 4. They've got Villa at home and then Brighton away. It's not quite as favourable. So the first thing I thought of when I was looking at a free hit is I want to go for 3 Man City. I want to have 3 Brighton. Most people have 3 Brighton anyway. And I want to have 3 Liverpool. And so that leaves me with having 2 from Man United. Yeah, there's some decent, single game weeks. I mean, Newcastle at home to Southampton looks good. I think people are just going to play Trippier. People are going to play Isak, if they have the players like that. Tony, obviously Brentford, looking at this, have the best fixture from the single game week players, home to Forest. So if you've got players like Tony and Isak, I think they're more than fine to play. Maybe you don't need to do a hit. And even Solanke at home to Leeds looks good, but as a free hitter I want to go for the double game week players. So starting front to back, only striker I actually really trust is Haaland, and he's going to be my captain. We'll move on to captain though in a little bit. So I'm going to play 1 up front. Midfield's where it gets really tough. This is the part I've struggled on a lot. It felt like the reason I wanted to go front to back was it felt like defenders and the goalkeeper were just whatever else. Once I sorted my attackers out, it was just the defenders were just, whatever I could get in for that price. So in midfield, I'm going to go for Salah. Obviously, he's going to be my vice captain. We'll get on to captain. I'm going to have Rashford. I feel like that's a bit of a no-brainer. McAllister, Veltman's back. So I'm definitely going to go for McAllister. He'll be playing further forward. His stats, even when he's playing inverted commas deeper, his stats are still very good. He's on penalties. I like having penalty takers, any time, but especially in a double game week. And I feel like he's definitely going to play, both of the games. Then there's the couple of more punty players that I've looked at. Now, I was considering going for Matoma. Obviously, he's in my normal team. He's in everyone's teams. But I had to make a sacrifice to go for the other 2 midfielders. That's De Bruyne and that's Gakpo. It doesn't feel great going without Matoma, but I prefer McAllister because he's on penalties. Matoma, if you've got a good rank, you're on free hit. I would definitely go for him. I think it's a huge risk going against him, but I'm happy to take that risk on and take a bit of a risk, because I mean I'm sat at about 68k, something like that. So I really want to try and push on. You know, if I finish 50k or finish 100k, it feels like kind of the same thing to me. So I'm not going to go for Matoma. I know a lot of people like March as well, but again, it's just personal preference. The two I've liked owning have been McAllister and Matoma. I had to go without one to go for this team. And we'll get onto the defenders I picked in a second as well. But yeah, so in my team, I'm going for McAllister. I can understand if you go for Matoma. I mean, you could even justify going for all three. It's just the other two I really do like. So De Bruyne, he was always going to be in my team, even before the 19-point haul. He was, you know, the other night, he was a key reason I wanted to wait for free hit 34. So I'm going to go for De Bruyne. There were some quotes from Pep about a niggle in his leg, but then he had an interview with NBC, the American TV channel, and he seemed to suggest he would play against Fulham. So with a player with the ceiling of De Bruyne, I think he's going to be hard for people to get. He's a reason, you know, I'm justifying this free hit. And then Gakpo, he's the other player that I'm going to go for. I was agonising over the Liverpool assets. I think Salah and Trent, most people would agree, they're absolute no-brainers. So really it came down to the whole structure. Do I go for Gakpo? Do I go for Jota? Do I go for Robertson? Now, obviously, we've covered Jota. I think that eliminated him. So then it became Gakpo against Robertson. I think with the news that Jota's not trained, we might see Gakpo. Maybe we can bump his expected minutes up a little bit. Maybe we can expect him to get 70 minutes, you know, in both games. I saw Jump the Wave on Twitter, Emma. She does a thing where she asks fans of teams to predict who they think is going to start. And Gakpo was about 68%, 69%. 69% of the fans had said they expect Gakpo to start twice. So, I mean, it's not a guaranteed start, you know, it's not like what we'd expect from someone like Salah or Rashford, but I think the upside's there with 2 home games against Spurs and Fulham. I'd love to add to Salah as well. And just on Robertson, before we get onto defenders as well, Robertson, he's tucking in as into the back three a little bit more when Trent tucks into midfield. He's getting assists, but they're from set pieces. There's a small risk with Tsimikas. I don't think it's enough to worry about, but there's that as well. So I just want to have 2 attackers from Liverpool. But obviously I know what I'm giving up here. And I mean, there's players I haven't got. Like I mentioned, the Brighton midfielders. Mahrez, he was very, very tempting as well. I was very tempted to go for him. It was just hard to squeezing him in. I did think about, and to be honest, I am still thinking about it. I could go with this team. I could go Mahrez over Gakpo. And then I've got Ruben Dias in defence. I could go for Robertson there. So it is kind of Gakpo versus Mahrez as well. And there's another key man. I mentioned penalties earlier, talking about McAllister. Bruno Fernandes, he turned out he wasn't injured. Again, he played 90 minutes. So you'd expect him to play 180 minutes in the double. And he's on penalties. So there's some players I'm having to go without. It's not easy. I know a lot of people have got Grealish as well. I mean, his numbers are not as good as, you know, a player like De Bruyne. They're not as good as a player like Mahrez, but his minutes have been better. So as a free hitter, you know, there's a lot of players that could damage my rank as well. A lot of people have gone for Grealish. If he outscores De Bruyne, you know, I'm in big trouble this week. But there's a lot of good non-free hit teams out there. So that's the midfielders, and then the defenders. Like I said, it was a bit of like the best of the rest. Like I could have gone for all sorts of combinations, and I still could. So Trent Alexander-Arnold, absolute no-brainer. And then it was like, do I want to go for Edison or do I want to go for a defender? And I've just decided I kind of wanted Man City attackers. Edison's not going to score a goal. Maybe I can get lucky. Ruben Dias predicted heavily to start in both fixtures in the double. So I'm taking a tiny risk with minutes. I think he's going to be good for both from, you know, what the predictors think. It's not as safe as Edison, but there's that tiny chance of an attacking return from Dias as well. So I'm kind of happy going Dias. I did consider Akanji as well. He seems to be the second best option. And maybe if you can't afford to get to Dias, you know, with your transfers, for example, if you're not on free hit, Akanji could be an acceptable option anyway. And then because, like I mentioned at the start of the video, I wanted to have 3 Brighton. This is where I go for Duncan Estupiñán. They've got 2 home games, Wolves and Man United. I mean, they drew 0-0 with Man United, didn't they, after 120 minutes in the cup game? So that could be 0-0, even though they've been shipping goals a little bit of late. So I'm kind of happy enough with Duncan Estupiñán. I'm firmly in the Dunk camp if I was only going to have one. Estupiñán did give away a silly penalty. I know Dunk did as well, but he did give away a very silly penalty, Estupiñán. So I do feel a lot more confident in Dunk's minutes. But if I'm going to go for 2 defenders, you know, they're the 2 you've got to go for. So yeah, that's the defenders. And then that just leaves, I said I want to have 2 Man United players. So that leaves De Gea in goal. But I think there's loads of great goalies this week. I mean, not going with Edison could be a little bit painful. I know he's not been putting up the biggest numbers in terms of points, but he feels, you know, a very safe player where I would expect him to get at least 8 points, potentially 12 with those fixtures with Fulham away and then West Ham at home. So I'm going for De Gea. He's got, you know, potential for save points. I don't really expect clean sheets in these games. Home to Villa. Villa have been obviously very, very good. Then away to Brighton. I know Brighton haven't been, you know, picking up the points as recently, but they still very, very capable of scoring a lot of goals. And I've got to give credit to Steele as well, the penalty legend who's in my normal team. It was hard to get rid of him for a week, and he's an incredible price. So there are 3 goalkeepers here. It's just my structure, and I'm talking about goalies a lot here, but my structure suited going for De Gea because I didn't really fancy Luke Shaw. He's playing at centre-back. I know he can take some set pieces. I just didn't really see the clean sheets, but I wanted to go for a double game week goalkeeper. So hopefully Man United can, you know, surprise me and actually pick up a clean sheet. De Gea can pick up some save points and I'll be very, very happy. So there are some talking points here. I think the main thing is I think 4-5-1 on free hits going to be very, very popular. And I think a lot of these players, people are going to be looking at bringing in long term. I would say going crazy for the City assets, though. Obviously, this is a free hit team. I don't have to worry about the games around the Champions League games. So I maybe wouldn't go crazy, you know, doing big hits to get them in because they could very easily miss, you know, one of the next 2 after the double game week. So like 1 or 2 in the next 4 games, but obviously 2 of those being in this game week. Just on captaincy, I mean, it's Haaland or Salah, and I've been quite strong on Salah this season, and it, you know, at times it's hurting my rank. I can't remember a single time I captained Salah and he outscored Haaland, but I did think about it briefly still. But I'm going to stick to Haaland here. I know I said I'm trying to chase a little bit, so I'm happy to go against players like Matoma, but I just don't really fancy betting against Haaland. It seems like he's going to play both games. You know, I can't really comment on his exact minutes because it depends how they're doing in that game. But I've just had enough of, you know, going against Haaland and being burnt. So, you know, if someone is really chasing, I have no problem with you going for Salah, for example. I think that's I'd much prefer that to Trent, for example. But yeah, 2 home fixtures for Salah, at home to Spurs, at home to Fulham. I mean, he's got the potential to go for 20 plus points. The problem is, so does Haaland. So yeah, that's my very, very brief look at my free hit team for this game week. I think a lot of those players people are going to be looking at. And like I said, just to recap, don't be scared of playing Newcastle players in particular. Tony, Solanke, you know, if you can't get to 11 doublers, I think they're going to be good this week still. And I mean, it could come to burn free hitters like myself if those single game week players step up, you know, once again. But thanks a lot for joining me. I'll be back for a future game week, and don't forget to like and subscribe.